Today's odds, 2%. That's the chance the market assigns to Bill and Hillary Clinton announcing their divorce by June 30th. Strangely enough, that's roughly the same odds Polymarket assigns to the release of the Epstein client list by that same date. Welcome to Prediction Market Prof. It's May 14th, and this is the channel that analyzes global affairs through the lens of prediction markets and tests whether we can profit from the wisdom of the crowds. Today's market movers. Yes shares for Marco Rubio being next to leave the White House spiked to 43 cents, up a massive 4,000% as the crowd decided he's the most dangerous thing in Trump's cabinet. Competent. The market is pricing in greater risk of higher inflation as oil prices stay elevated and wheat prices soar thanks to ongoing tensions in the Middle East. And Starmer out by June 30th shares have dropped from 75 cents to 34 cents. Crowd wisdom or opportunity? Let's start with Trump's cabinet. The market for who leaves next is full of people Democrats would gladly call embarrassing, incompetent fools, and who many Republicans would call, after checking the polling, embarrassing, incompetent fools. There's Pete Hegseth, who's arguably the least qualified Secretary of Defense in American history. There's Kash Patel, an FBI figure accused of getting so drunk that agents allegedly had to batter down his door with one of those battering ram things. A former heroin addict in RFK, who's an anti-vax health secretary whose daily performance is a powerful argument for bringing back shame, and yet suddenly top of the list is Marco Rubio. Unlike much of Trump's cabinet, Rubio is not an idiot. Granted, he seems to have left a few of his principles under the pillow since joining the Trump administration, but recently he's looked like the only grown-up in the room. Admittedly, in this administration, grown up in the room mostly means can identify Belgium on a map, but Rubio has been Secretary of State, acting National Security Advisor, acting US Aid Administrator, acting archivist, and, at least according to the memes, Secretary of literally everything. The internet has noticed. The joke is no longer just little Marco, it is Marco Rubio, the one man apparently trusted to run foreign policy, national security, the archives, and possibly the White House coffee machine. And that's the problem. Rubio is gaining popularity. Some Republicans are beginning to tout him as the natural successor to the Don, and whilst one might think competence and rising popularity would make him safer, that would be to completely misunderstand Donald Trump. In a normal administration, competence makes you valuable. In Trump world, competence makes you suspicious. Trump has teased extending his stay beyond 2028. Running again would be unconstitutional, but Trump has never really treated the Constitution as law so much as an unusually bossy pamphlet. Some have suggested that he might have Don Jr., his son, run, and then he stays on as vice president, and then get Don Jr. to resign. So Donald Trump, at least according to various pundits, has very serious intentions of remaining US president. So Rubio's rise may be interpreted not as an asset, but as a threat. He's become competition, and Trump has two known responses to competition: humiliation and elimination. Occasionally both if there's a camera nearby. So the market may well be pricing in sabotage. Rubio may not be at risk because he's failing, but precisely because he's succeeding. Does competent kill? In this cabinet, apparently yes. On this one, we got a little lucky. When I went to buy Rubio shares, they were only at 1 cent. My order filled at 5 cents and they're now trading at 43. That's not investment genius, that's accidentally stepping on a rake and finding a gold bar attached to the handle. Next up, inflation. CPI was released this week, spiking to 3.8% and well above expectations, or at least the expectations of the financial markets. We were predicting higher than that. Unsurprisingly, the odds of inflation hitting 4% in 2026 spiked too, and we took 103% profit on our yes shares. Those shares are almost certain to resolve in our favor, but there's little more to gain, so the money can be better deployed elsewhere. So why is inflation rising in the US? Basically, the answer is incompetent governance, a series of own goals. First, the tariffs. These were sold as making foreigners pay. In practice, tariffs are a tax on ordinary Americans, but with more flags and worse economics. Second, the war. A war that could have been avoided if Trump hadn't torn up the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal negotiated under Obama. That agreement was working in the relevant sense. It constrained Iran's nuclear program, and yet Trump tore it up anyway, basically out of spite. He claimed it involved taking $1.7 billion in cash out of American banks and handing it to Tehran. This was, of course, complete nonsense. It was Iran's money in the first place. It was money paid to America for weapons that America never delivered. So I'm not entirely sure it's unreasonable to ask for their money back. But now, as discussed ad nauseum on this channel, Iran has blocked the Strait of Hormuz, an event only Trump seems not to have foreseen. And oil and food prices have risen accordingly. And since Iran is not likely to reopen it soon, unless Trump and Israel concede to their demands, which they're never going to do, inflation looks set to continue. So whilst we have sold our 4% inflation positions, we continue to hold yes shares on inflation hitting 5% by 2027. I grant that 5% may be a bit of a push, but we're betting on credence, not reality, and will likely exit before resolution. We just need the crowd to increase their belief that inflation will hit 5%. We don't need it to actually hit 5%. Finally, the Starmer out trade. A few weeks ago, before the local elections, I announced my plan to buy Starmer out shares and close them after the election. I did this, but I took a small loss. They initially spiked from 65 to 75 cents as Labour predictably did poorly while the far-right and more progressive parties gained ground. But they sold off within the day and we exited for a 10% loss. Now, Starmer out by June 30th is trading at 33 cents. This is despite 4 junior Labour ministers resigning, the health secretary stepping down, and 80 Labour MPs reportedly calling for his resignation, with 81 triggering a leadership contest. It's not a foregone conclusion that Starmer will be gone by June 30th, but the rules only require him to announce his intention to resign. He doesn't need to be physically removed from Downing Street by men in grey suits and one emotionally exhausted civil servant. Starmer will fight, of course he will. His entire political personality is regional bank manager surviving a hostage situation through paperwork. But paperwork and pressure is mounting, and politicians always deny they'll resign right up until the moment they resign. When Liz Truss became Prime Minister, she was so unpopular that The Sun live-streamed a lettuce to see whether it would outlast her. The lettuce won. It had no policies, no mandate, and no charisma, and still projected more stability than the government. I think it's time to buy your Kier Starmer lettuce and start the clock. We bought yes shares in Starmer out by June 30th at 38 cents. They will decay over time. If we get into early June and the pressure is easing rather than strengthening, we'll take the loss. So, to summarize, Rubio may be at risk because he's competent. Inflation remains vulnerable to tariffs, war, and the governing philosophy of repeatedly stepping on rakes, and Kier Starmer may yet discover that, in British politics, the lettuce isn't a joke, it's an institution. That's all for today. Thanks for joining us on Prediction Market Prof. I'm Professor Benjamin Smart, and if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe for more. And remember, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, but fortunately, so can most governments.